Okay, this video is a book review. The name of the book is Return to the Primitive, the Anti-Industrial Manifesto. The book is written by Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand is the smartest woman who ever lived. It's a great book. It's actually a collection of essays by Ayn Rand, and there's a few other essays by sort of persons of her objectivist philosophy, but it's primarily Ayn Rand's essays. So here is Ayn Rand, being interviewed on a TV show. And she says that capitalism is the greatest economic achievement of mankind. Communism is savage barbarism. She knows. She grew up in Russia. The communists were terrible to her and her family, and she was lucky to have survived. She knows the truth. She goes from seeing everybody starving to death in Russia and Ukraine to the incredible abundance of America, where she sees skyscrapers in Hollywood and New York and all these amazing places. Okay. Now here is the cover of the book, Ayn Rand, Return to the Primitive, the Anti-Industrial Revolution. Okay, so I meant to pronounce that, the Anti-Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution ushered us into the modern age of technology, and she says that multiculturalism and environmentalism are the opposite. They're taking us back to the cave of Plato, back to primitive tribalism and becoming a third world crap hole like most of the rest of the world. Okay, so here's a painting of Ayn Rand with the Statue of Liberty, and she was very grateful for the freedom of America. She would say, "There but for the grace of God go I," like all the poor, starving, and dead persons of Russia and those under communist control. Just so you know about it, there's a YouTube channel called the Ayn Rand Institute. And don't get me wrong, the Ayn Rand Institute, it's good where they play Ayn Rand speaking. Her videos are great, but do not pay attention to the ones that are made by the people who run the site. They themselves are a communist infiltration of the legacy of Ayn Rand. But the ones where she speaks are great. And she speaks in this one here called The Aesthetic Vacuum of Our Age. Basically how modern art is fake bunch of crap, and how it's ridiculous of multiculturalism to compare magnificent statues like those of the ancient Greece to the crappy modern arts or those by primitive third world cultures. Okay, here's an Ayn Rand quote. Typical Ayn Rand. "There is no difference between communism and socialism except in the means of advancing the same ultimate end. Communism proposes to enslave men by force. Socialism by the vote, fake vote. It is merely the difference between murder and suicide." And sadly, the average Christian's pretty stupid and gullible, and they've been seduced into socialism, which is now trending into slavery and communism, and they're sort of waking up too slowly, and it's not clear whether they're going to make it or not. One of the big themes of this book, Return to the Primitive, was comparison between Apollonian philosophy, that of the god Apollo of the ancient Greeks, which highly valued reason and thought and intelligence and effort, versus Dionysus, the god of wine, debauchery, decadence, and violence also. Okay, Dionysus was not good. Nietzsche loved Dionysus. Okay, Nietzsche, I think was a homosexual, and he liked that about the Greeks. Nietzsche is much less of a philosopher than people realize. Okay, he was entertaining. He certainly was. But when you get down to it, who was his hero? Napoleon and Bismarck. Okay. All right. So, anyways, here is Ayn Rand, another quote. "When you have made evil the means of survival, do not expect men to remain good. Do not expect them to stay moral and to lose their lives for the purpose of becoming cannon fodder of the immoral. Do not expect them to produce when production is punished and looting is rewarded." That's like the joke of Ann Coulter. She said Russian communism caused 70 years in a row, 70 years of bad weather. That's because the farmers, they would get ripped off. The commies and the Soviets would steal all their produce, so they would just grow as little as possible not to starve. That's why so many men in communist countries become alcoholics. They're not allowed to achieve anything. And Ayn Rand says, "Do not ask who is destroying the world. You are, if you go along with this leftist BS." Okay, and I can also tell you, I spoke to a bunch of people who lived in communist countries. I know a bunch of them, and they tell me things like, in a communist country, you have to lie all day long in order to survive. Okay, it forces you to be that way, and then people become very corrupt, and it becomes natural to just lie. I know people from communist countries, in their opinion, they're so used to lying all day long that they think anybody who doesn't lie a lot is a chump. And that's why they don't do well for meritocracy and productivity. Okay, now here's some quotes from the book Return of the Primitive by Ayn Rand. And remember, she's the smartest lady who ever lived. I studied all the geniuses that I could, and she was the smartest one, her and Ann Coulter. Ann Coulter is a different type of genius. She's actually much more funny and more clever and a better writer and more fun. But Ayn Rand's like, holy crap. Like, man, is she smart to get to the point of issues. She figured out most of the common modern societal problems back in the 1960s and 1970s. Okay, I never even heard of Ayn Rand until I was in my 30s. I took a class in Russian literature at Stanford. They never mentioned anything about Ayn Rand. She's of Russian descent. She should be considered a Russian author, Russian and American. I also took an economics class at Stanford taught by Boskin. He was the famous economist of Ronald Reagan, yet his class was Mickey Mouse. Ayn Rand's name never came up. His class was so easy I didn't even go to class. I just had a girl bring me the homework. Now let's go. Here's Ayn Rand speaking. All rights are derived from the right to life. Western civilization is based on individualism. The USA is in the center of an ideological battle between the good, the right, and the evil, the left. The goal of an ideological battle is to enlighten the minds of the ignorant majority. The first step is to make oneself heard. In order to be heard, one must have something to say. One must know one's case from start to finish. Goodness, truth, reason, and beauty are on the side of the right. The Berkeley riots of 1965 were run by leftist communists who took advantage of the moral vacuum of the faculty and the college administration. That's a repeated point of hers, that the left is smart and aggressive, and the ivory tower college professor scumbags have sold out to the Communist Party, and they trick the stupid, ignorant, hoodlum youth into doing destructive, bad things to intimidate the right and to gain more power for the left. And you see that happening over and over, okay? Ayn Rand continues, decisions should be based on reason. Ideas end where a gun begins. And then I'll just give you my opinion here. What I've seen is that the great books about these types of issues, like by 1984, An Animal Farm by Orwell, as well as Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, and then Ayn Rand's essays and books, they're used more by the smart, crafty, mischievous people of the left to refine their strategy than they are by the right to wake up to what's happening. Because there's far more people in the moral majority that want things to be good in America than there are in the evil, Dionysians that run the Democratic Party communism, okay? But they're so smart and clever and organized that they're much more powerful. It's just how it is. Okay, Ayn Rand continues. The left resents true achievement. The left wears an Apollonian mask, but it is really Dionysian. The left wants a dictatorship. The left takes a legitimate issue and distorts it to help them get more power. The left uses socialist ivory tower professors to partner with young hoodlums to destroy the right, and in so doing to destroy America. The essence of the left is hatred of reason. Okay, now my little input, I say it's really hatred of Christianity, because that's what promotes freedom. Okay, Ayn Rand continues, what's at stake for mankind is the survival of reason. In order to act, a man needs a comprehensive view of life. He cannot avoid this need. His only choice is whether it is true or false. If it is false, then he becomes his own destroyer. Just like, for example, if a person learns false information about nutrition and health, like is stupid enough to go along with paleo, keto, carnivore, or SAD diet, or high-fat phony, high-fat vegan diet, Mediterranean diet, they become their own destroyer. They plug up their arteries and they get sick. Okay, and don't get me wrong, the high-fat phony, vegan version of the Mediterranean diet is not anywhere as bad as the SAD diet, but it's still bad. Okay, Ayn Rand continues. Reason leads to individualism and capitalism. Good. Collectivism leads to tribalism and takes away the rights of the individual. So I put good things in green, bad things in red. So collectivism leads to tribalism and it takes away the rights of the individual. It tries to see everybody as a member of tribe, okay? Philosophy is the most important subject because it determines the attitude to all the other subjects. Mankind came into his own 500 years ago with the ancient Greeks. They developed philosophy. Yes, for example, Alfred North Whitehead had said that all of philosophy is merely a footnote to Plato. Okay, the great Greek philosophers, especially Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Okay, the left has especially taken some of the bad ideas of Plato, who was impressed too much by Sparta because they had won the war over Athens, and not enough of the good ideas like those by Aristotle, who promoted freedom and individualism. Okay, Ayn Rand continues. Kant, Dewey, and Marcuse and their followers are evil haters. Kant was the first hippie. She's talking about Immanuel Kant. He wrote the book Critique of Reason. Kant was trying to destroy reason. The obliteration of reason leads to the obliteration of reality, to the destruction of meritocracy. When man abandons reason, he goes by brute force. Kant, Dewey, and Marcuse, and the like, were hoping that they could pull the puppet strings in the background. Then she talks about this incredible essay she wrote called Compra Chicos. Like in Spanish, that means to buy children. But what it's really about was to destroy the minds of children. She had mentioned some ancient cultures where they had done things to cause deformity and misshape the bodies of children in some cruel culture. And she says that's being done to the minds of children nowadays in the public schools. She said that the public schools are destroying the ability of children to think and to learn, destroying their reason, to train them to respond to slogans like a dog whistle, to make their mental processes more like a parrot than a human being. She says this is animal training. Animal training is repetition and memorization. It's not the same as good human teaching. Good human teaching should be for understanding. The look-say method of teaching causes dyslexia. A thinking child cannot conform to authority. Okay, the next thing here. Okay, Ayn Rand continues. The purpose of multiculturalism is to destroy Western civilization. That's an important point. It tries to pretend that it's something good and nice and thoughtful, but it's evil. Its goal is the destruction of individualism and freedom. The purpose of multiculturalism is to destroy Western civilization. The idea that a Native American teepee is equivalent to a skyscraper, that savages counting on their fingers are equal to the calculus of Isaac Newton. It always praises non-Western cultures. It always criticizes everything Western. Multiculturalism is against all judgment. But that's not fair to man, because in order to progress, man needs to make judgments, like fire is good. It is better to plant crops than to forage off the land. Most of the people in poor socialist countries would swim the ocean to come to the USA if they could. Multiculturalism is a repudiation of civilization. Multiculturalism is trying to return us to a primitive tribalism, to put us back in the cave. So that's where the title of the book comes from, Return to the Primitive, that all this multiculturalism stuff and this environmentalism stuff is trying to destroy America, destroy our wealth, our prosperity, our technology, and put us back in the cave of Aristotle, of being clueless, poor chumps. Okay, then she continues, Ayn Rand, there but for the grace of the USA go I. She's not starving and dying like the poor people in Russia. The founding fathers of the USA were the greatest founding fathers of any country ever in the history of the world. The USA used to be a melting pot, and that was good. Society should be colorblind. Affirmative action is racism against non-minority persons. Affirmative action is racist, and it is against meritocracy. This so-called diversity is an excuse for racism against whites. Then she goes on, Ayn Rand, egalitarianism and environmentalism are an extension of Kant to the modern world. The inescapable conclusion about the environmental movement is that it wants to deindustrialize the West. That's a big statement. The inescapable conclusion about the environmental movement is that it wants to deindustrialize the West. They tell us that we should sacrifice our farms, our livelihood, for the sake of a tree or a fish or a snail. Their goal is to shut down the USA. Their goal is to shut down the USA and to return us to the primitive. There's the title again, Return to the Primitive. Okay, Ayn Rand continues. The innovator is by definition the man who challenges the standard. NASA and the astronauts landing on the moon were Apollonian. People were rightfully proud of that. The American people were starved for an achievement, for a vision of man as a hero. The rock and roll concert at Woodstock was Dionysian. Young, scummy savages, drug addicts behaving like hoodlums. American women are the most privileged females on earth. Okay, and then I have a little quote that I added in here. You can destroy Christianity, but you will not find a substitute. What are you going to replace it with? Drag Queen Story Hour? Okay. So anyways, Ayn Rand makes a pretty good case that all of these things that pretend to take the moral high ground are actually evil lies. That multiculturalism and environmentalism, their goal is the destruction of the USA and Western civilization and freedom and prosperity, and to return us to the primitive cave of Aristotle where we live like third world ignorant savages. So hopefully America is going to recover and become prosperous and good. Again, I hope so.